fact that you're being recorded, you don't speak your mind, or you get self-conscious, or you start to wonder about, I need to go back and edit that because I sounded stupid or something like that. And if I think about it, then I'll clam up and I'll have stage fright. I'm very shy. So I'm gonna pass this around for everyone. There should be plenty of copies, and if more people come in along the way, we can hand them out to them as well. These are more Proverbs. We're going to continue last week. Now, this is a nice introductory warm-up to subjects that we can do. But of course, like I said before, we will have an opportunity to brainstorm together about subjects that we might be interested in doing, and even maybe moving from topic to topic along subjects that different people express an interest in, which I think would be great. That'll keep us all interested and excited, and nothing will get old or boring or dry or anything like that, which otherwise could happen. So I put together another couple of selections of Mishalim from Mishle, from the book of Mishle that we talked about last week. And these are, I again grouped them thematically. So they're organized by themes. These themes, first of all, these verses, as I said last time, don't appear all in the same place in Mishle. They're not in a row. Mishle is written in a way that makes it very difficult to find anything, actually. Because Mishle is written in what seems like no particular order. So you will have, let's say, in chapter 10, I'm just saying, for example, something on a certain topic. And then in chapter 15, you'll have another one proverb on another topic. They're not lined up, they're not organized according to theme most of the time. Sometimes there are a few that connect to one another, but most of the time they're kind of seemingly random. And one of the reasons that was given for this, that I once asked somebody who's a student of Mishle, who's really, really involved in it and really devoted to the book of Mishle. He studies it a lot and he teaches it a lot. I asked him, what is your theory about why Mishle is not organized? It's not a very good self-help book because there's no chapter headings, and you can't find anything in the book. You have to read the entire book to find something. And his theory, and I thought this was a nice theory, he said that Mishle is a guide to life, and life is not a neat kind of thing, right? Life is kind of random. What you encounter in life, you don't know what to expect. One minute you might be tested in one area where you need to have the wisdom to be able to rise to a challenge of a certain type, and the next minute you might be challenged in a totally different way. So life presents itself to us in a very kind of chaotic way. We're not warned in advance. Hashem doesn't come down and tell us, oh, by the way, today you have the following difficult situations that you're going to face, and you're going to have to handle them. Number one, you're going to have a conflict with somebody at work. And number two, one of your family members is going to betray you. And number three, you're going to have a challenge where you're going to get angry and need to control yourself or something like that. You don't know in advance what life is going to throw to you. So we have to be prepared for any eventuality. And he said maybe that's why Mishle is written this way, because it's written the same way life is written, which is not necessarily according to a predetermined order. But I, being a much more simple-minded person who likes everything to be organized and simple and straightforward, decided to go through the book and collect different proverbs on the same theme so that we could talk about them in a more thematic way. But they're not actually like this in the book. So, the first one is the first set of 4 Mishalim, 4 proverbs. So we have B'siftei navon timatzeh chochma. This is very interesting. On the lips of the understanding person, wisdom will be found. V'shevet legev chasar lev. Now, this English is not exactly how I would translate it. It takes away, if you understand Hebrew, any translation takes away from some of the sense of the original. Like they say, every translation is an interpretation. There's an interpretation behind it. But literally what it means is a stick to the back of the foolish person. Okay? Now, in this proverb you have 2 body parts mentioned. What are the 2 body parts? Lips and back. Okay? Now you might not notice that right away if you're not looking to take apart the proverb. You'll just hear, oh yeah. But then you realize that it's got back and it's got lips. So you're already dealing with body parts. And what are the 2 things? Okay, on the lips of one person, the wise person, is going to be wisdom. Right? Now, what do you usually use your lips for? Speaking is the most common thing, right? That's what we associate lips, talking. Hashem sifatai tiftach, Hashem open my lips that I can speak, that I can pray. So lips are usually for speech. Okay? So on the lips of the wise person, you will find wisdom, which is another way of saying what? Well, how would you translate it into regular language?
Wise people. Understanding people say smart.
They say smart stuff. Right? Exactly. Understanding people say smart stuff. But there's a stick on the back of the foolish person. Now the stick is talking about a specific type of stick. It doesn't mean a stick that he's carrying around. You know what kind of stick it means? A stick that somebody's smacking him with. Okay? So that's a very nice image and everything, but what does that have to do with the wise person's wisdom on the wise person's lips? And what does it really mean? Does somebody follow every stupid person around with a stick and beat them all the time? It would be nice. Maybe the world would be a better place if we had that kind of enforcement. That if anybody was foolish, somebody would walk around and give them a little smack and they would straighten them out. But it doesn't work like that. So what do you think it's talking about? What do you think it means that there's a stick that's going to hit the back of the foolish person? And why is that connected to the lips of the wise person? It seems that these two statements have nothing to do with each other, right? One is saying the wise person has lots of wisdom, talks a lot of smart stuff, and the foolish person gets hit in the back with a stick.
Nobody wants to do what he has to say.
So
It's kind of shutting him up. Like, he's speaking foolishness.
Oh, because he's speaking foolishness. I never thought of that. That could be. Okay, so the wise person has something interesting to say. People listen to him, but everybody tells the foolish person to get out of here. They kick him out the door, or her. Or they try. Okay, that's one possible meaning. Can anybody else think of another meaning? I'll tell you what I thought. I'll just share with you what I thought, is that a lot of times in Mishle, we find this idea of hitting the foolish person as kind of a metaphor for the idea that foolish people get hit by life. Not by other people, actually. But the idea that a wise person who's thinking out, a plan, and is really, for example, you go to school. Is anybody here in college or? Okay. If you don't meet with your advisor or has been in college anytime, but you don't meet with your advisor and you decide, I'm going to decide what classes to take. What's going to happen to you? What? You're going to be in trouble because you don't really know what classes to take, but you decided to take the classes that you thought were the most interesting ones, and maybe they were the most interesting ones, but then when it came time for everyone else to graduate, they said, I'm sorry, you're missing 18 credits that you didn't take that you're supposed to take in your first year and your second year and your third year, but you didn't follow what the advisor said. You decided to register for whatever courses you wanted. So what happens to you? You get smacked, right? That is a wake-up that a person who's thinking in advance and says, I don't know what I'm doing here. I'd better find out from an advisor what the wise thing is to do. That's the lips of the wise person, or the lips of the understanding person will have wisdom. In other words, if I think things out in advance and I listen to the advice of wise people who know what they're doing, then I'm going to be able to succeed. But I'm going to get hit in the back. In other words, lips are also in front of you. That means that you are facing forward and thinking ahead. What should I do? This happened to me, by the way. That's why I'm using this example, because I am a fool. And when I was in college, which was when colleges were just being created at the beginning of time, a long time ago, and I actually spent the first 2 years of my college career at Suffolk Community College, because I lived in Suffolk County. And I wasn't sure what I wanted to do yet, and I graduated high school early, so my friends were still not even in college yet, so I didn't want to go. So I decided to go to community college, which was local and easy. And I thought I was ready to finish my second year, and I went to fill out whatever you're supposed to fill out when you're getting ready to graduate from the 2-year program, and then I went to Stony Brook for the rest. So I came and they said, I'm sorry, you forgot to take some freshman course on study skills or some stupid thing. In the first year, why did you never come to the advisement office until now? I said, well, I kind of figured I would be able to use my brain and work out what courses I was supposed to take, but that didn't work. So I ended up being delayed another semester because I didn't think ahead. So I got smacked in the back. Why is it the back of the foolish person? Because it's after it's already done. In other words, you get smacked because you went ahead with your course of action without thinking, and then you get hit by life, pretty much. If you don't think ahead, you don't ask advice from people. It's a very smart thing to ask advice from people. Whenever you're getting involved in anything that you're not that it's your first time doing it, you're not entirely sure, it's a big undertaking. You don't have to ask advice about, what to order in a restaurant, but when it's something that's a significant life undertaking, it's good to ask advice because the lips of the wise person have wisdom, but the foolish person who doesn't have wisdom is going to get hit by life. And that's how he's going to learn. Or she's going to learn is going to be by the hard way, like they say, right? You're going to learn the hard way. Have you heard that before? People say that in English, right? What does it mean you're going to learn the hard way? It means after the fact, you're going to end up suffering consequences and say, "Oh, well, I really shouldn't have done that." That's like they say. There's a proverb in English that says that one of my friends put it in his high school yearbook. He said that life is the most difficult teacher. Why? Because she gives the test and then she teaches the lesson. That's very deep. Okay. Now that's not in Mishle. That's an English saying, but that's a very good saying as well, right? That's for most people. In other words, you encounter a test and you learn afterwards the lesson from the experience. Now that's presupposing that you weren't wise enough to get advice first. Then maybe you could have avoided that problem and you could have learned the lesson in advance. Yes.
But it doesn't seem here to be talking about a wise person versus a foolish person. It seems to be talking about somebody who's understanding. That's not the same thing as a wise person.
Well, here, understanding here doesn't mean understanding like the way that we use it in English.
It doesn't not come from the way we mean.
Like lahavin, yeah. Yeah, to understand.
That's considered a wise person?
It's a type of wise.
It doesn't necessarily be foolish either.
So that's a very good point. So there are a lot of terms in Mishle that are used for different kinds of fools, because it's a very exact science of categorizing what kind of fool you could be. Not all fools are the same. Chasar lev means he doesn't have a heart.
That makes sense. He doesn't do things so hard. He doesn't think
Right.
things through.
Or doesn't think things through, so he's lacking something, right? Navon comes from mevin. Mevin means to understand what's behind something, right? To understand what's behind something, usually. Leavin davar mitoch davar, we say in Hebrew. To understand one thing from another. It's having a bigger perspective. Okay, chasar lev means that the person's lacking something. They're not complete in their thinking. Exactly. Chaser is to be missing something. Okay, so that's the first one. Now I wanted to actually, for a second, skip to the fourth one because it's a similar idea, but not exactly the same. It says Techat ge'ara b'mevin. Again, we're talking about a mevin. Mevin is a person who understands. Ge'ara means a correction or a criticism or a rebuke of the person who is understanding is better mehakot kesil me'ah, from smacking the fool 100 times. Again, we're using this idea of smacking the foolish person. Okay, this doesn't have to necessarily be a literal smacking, that we go around smacking foolish people. Sometimes we need to do that. But we try not to use physical retribution. The idea of mehakot kesil, that the foolish person gets hit, is again talking about how a foolish person mainly learns from experiencing when they fail. They do something foolish, they realize it was a really bad idea, and next time they avoid it. Okay? But an understanding person has something superior. Now this is talking about where the wise person also made a mistake, right? How can you tell it's talking about a wise person who also made a mistake? Because you're criticizing him, right? Somebody's criticizing the wise person. And when the wise person receives a criticism, it says that criticism for the wise person is worth more than hitting the fool 100 times. Because what does it mean hitting the fool 100 times? What does that mean about the fool? Right, he makes a lot of mistakes every time. He has the same. He doesn't generalize, right? Like we say, you don't learn your lesson, right? You go into a situation. Let's say the person is very lazy. Okay, I'm just giving an example. So the person's lazy. She's lazy in school, so she doesn't do well in school. She says, I really have to stop being lazy in school. But that doesn't mean I have to not be lazy at work. Maybe I'll be fine if I'm lazy at work. That also doesn't work, right? So the person who's a fool doesn't generalize from what they learn. So even if they get hit by something, in other words, even if they have a consequence in their life, like let's take an example, a very simplistic example. Let's say the person doesn't eat healthy, okay? And so they have some health problems as a result of that. So they might learn, I really shouldn't eat a lot of cookies because I ate a lot of cookies and then I went to the doctor and my blood pressure, my cholesterol, all those things. So the doctor said, stop eating cookies every day, no problem. Donuts. Right? Donuts, goes to the doctor. I'm sorry, it's even worse now. Donuts are probably even worse than cookies. He says, okay, no more donuts. Now I'll just eat French fries. Because French fries, I figure they're different because they're not sweet, it's salty, and it's a vegetable. It's potato. Right? French fries are good for you, right? They have to be. It's from the ground. So this is an example of the fool getting hit 100 times, meaning the fool doesn't generalize from what he or she learns from life, but sees, okay, that thing didn't work out, I'll try another thing. But rather than taking the big picture, wait a second, the idea here is I need to understand what's good for my body and what isn't good for my body. Not just keep changing from one diet to another. None of them are good. French fries are not really better than donuts. Donuts are not really better than cookies. Okay? Whatever you're smoking is not good for you. Okay? So one thing, another thing, none of it is good. So the person who is a fool doesn't generalize. So there's a story, this is a funny joke. There's this funny joke about two guys are talking to each other, and one guy says to the other, I want to ask you a riddle. How many cookies can you eat on an empty stomach? And so the person thinks for a second and says, 5. He says, wrong. You can only eat 1 because once you eat 1, you don't have an empty stomach anymore. Right? So the guy who heard the joke said, wow, that's really smart. I'm going to go tell somebody else that joke. So he goes to synagogue the next day. He sees his friend. He says, hey, I want to ask you a riddle. What is it? How many cookies can you eat on an empty stomach? The person thinks for a second. He says, 3. He says, you know what? If you had said 5, I would have had a really good joke for you. Right? He didn't get it. Right? He only heard the specific way that he was told the joke, or that it happened to him. But he didn't get the general idea that he was supposed to learn from the joke, right? That on an empty stomach, once you eat 1, it's not empty anymore. It doesn't matter what number you say. Anything more than 1 is the wrong answer. So that's an example of somebody who doesn't learn the general idea. But really from one experience, let's say you have one experience with somebody, it could be in a relationship, it could be something happened in a job, it could be anything. You can either just say, you know what, I had a bad experience with this boss or this teacher or whatever. I'm going to avoid that teacher. I'm going to avoid that boss. I'm going to avoid that person. Or you could think to yourself, well, what can I learn more generally from what happened with that person that I don't make the same mistake with another person? Because just because if something went wrong in my relationship with this one person, it could be that I did something that would also create problems in the next relationship. Like a lot of times people do that, right? They have different relationships, or let's say they might have be dating, or they might be married, and so they have one relationship and things don't work out, and then they go to the next relationship and it's the same problem. How come I keep attracting the same kinds of bad guys? Right? You hear people say that. How come my relationships, they keep ending up terrible like that? But they don't realize, well, maybe it wasn't the first guy, it wasn't the second guy, it wasn't the third guy, but there's something more general that you need to learn from the experience that you can apply moving forward that will help you prevent these problems from happening. So that is the mevin. The mevin, one lesson, one mistake that she makes, the mevina in this case, that she makes, she can apply more generally to so many circumstances. And whereas the fool will only see in that one case. Okay? And that's the difference. It's the same as the other two mishalim here really are saying that when bad things happen to other people, like the wicked man is a substitute for the righteous man, and in place of the upright is the rebellious. Okay? These two other mishalim are the same idea. That a wise person doesn't even need, necessarily, an open-minded person doesn't even need the bad thing to happen to them. If they see somebody else made a certain mistake and ended up in trouble, they can even learn from that, right? They don't have to wait for it to happen to them. That's why we read the Tanakh, to learn about all the people that made mistakes, or we study history to find out about all the people who made mistakes in the past. So we can learn from it without repeating it. We don't have to first make all the mistakes that everybody before us made, and that's what parents a lot of times try to teach their kids. Oh, don't do this. I made this mistake when I was a kid. Don't do it. And of course, a lot of times we don't listen to our parents because we know better than them. We know everything, right? But sometimes we listen, and sometimes they're even right. Probably only by chance, right? Just by accident. But our parents try to say to us, hey, listen, I've been through this already. Learn from what happened to me. Don't wait till it happens to you. A lot of times we're worried that, the next generation, they won't learn from the wisdom of the previous generation. So, this is something that a wise person can do. A wise person can generalize from what happens to us. We can take what happens to us and think deeply and say, was the reason why this went wrong because of that other person, because they were really bad, and this is not going to ever happen again with any other person? That's possible. The person could be crazy. Okay, sometimes you're dealing with a crazy person. It has nothing to do with you. Or it could be that you could learn something. You know what? I was a little bit too, when I saw that the person was getting very defensive, I pushed harder on the person, and of course they got really angry with me. I need to learn that when I see a person is getting defensive, maybe I should back off a little bit. Or I'm just giving an example. Okay? Or if I see that a person is getting very angry, I shouldn't say to them, do you know what the two most useless words in the English language are? Calm down. Have you ever been really upset and somebody said, calm down, and you said, oh, okay, that's a good idea. You're right, I should do that.
Or relax.
Oh, relax, it's the same thing. Relax. Well, that works every time, right? Because when somebody says relax, that's totally what you're thinking that you should do at that moment. These are phrases that are completely. It even says in Pirkei Avot, by the way, you're not supposed to try to calm somebody bishat kaso. In the time that they're angry, don't try to calm them. Nobody's ready to listen when they're in the middle of anger. We all know, everybody here has been in that situation where you've been upset, right? And somebody comes and says, relax, it's no big deal. What do you mean? If I could think on that level, I wouldn't be upset right now. Give me a few minutes, right? So sometimes we could go to our friend, and she is getting all upset, and say, relax. And then she says, get out of here, I don't want to hear that. And we say, oh, she's really a nasty person. I didn't do anything wrong. But I'm never going to try to calm her again. But then we see our other friend getting really upset, and we do the same thing. And we say, oh, I didn't realize she was a nasty person too. So I'm not going to try to calm her again either. So that's called not learning the general principle, right? The general principle is, if somebody's very upset, listening to them and sharing and showing empathy is the way to go, right? That's what everybody wants. Anybody who's upset or sad doesn't want to be told, calm down, relax, get over it, it's not a big deal. That just makes you feel worse. Oh my gosh, not only did my pet frog die and I'm very depressed and crying, but now you're telling me that it's not important and I should get over it. Nobody understands me. I am alone in the world. What a terrible tragedy. You feel even worse, right? Or if you get angry about something and other people start to tell you to relax, it gets you even angrier because you say, not only is this thing bad, but I have no friends. My friends tell me to relax. They're not angry with me. The right thing to do is say, oh, I see you're very angry. Do you want to talk about it? Let them just vent. That's what everybody wants to do when they're angry. And eventually, when they're ready, they're going to calm down, because what goes up must come down. And the same thing is true with temper. We all eventually have to calm down, right? Or even Sephardic people. It's true. We all do. That's what the Mishle is talking about. So Mishle is saying, you got to generalize from what you learn. Don't think it was just, Tiffany is really very difficult, but anybody else, But Stacy, if I try to talk to her, she's going to calm down when I say relax, because she's much nicer. No, you have to learn the general principle. And you can learn not only the general principle from what you experience, you can even learn a principle from other people. Oh, I saw what happened over there. I can observe and realize. I'll tell you an example. Just a random example. Remember Borders Books? Remember the store Borders Books? You know what happened to Borders Books? Borders Books is a great example that we can learn from, because it's an example of people who were resistant to change, they didn't want to believe that the market was going towards e-books and away from printed books and all that. So they waited too long, and they were sure, hey, Borders books have been around for a long time. They're not going to we're too big to fail. We're not going to fail. And they waited and waited and waited for everybody to come and bail them out. And of course, when they heard about how bad the company was doing, everyone's going to come and buy a ton of books because nobody wants Borders to close, right? And we know how that ended. So what happens, there's a lesson to be learned from that, which is you need to adapt to changing realities. Okay, when you see, I knew a person who was in a printing business, okay? Printing business. And the printing business is becoming obsolete. Does anybody know why? Everything is digital. He used to make plans for architects and all that, and print thousands and thousands and thousands of sheets. Nobody uses that anymore. But he said, "Listen, I'm not going to. I want to continue my business the way that my ancestors did it back in the old country. I'm going to keep being a printer." His son came and said, "No, let me change the business. Let me modernize the business. We got to." He said they ended up parting ways. The son had to leave the business because the father wouldn't allow him to change it. So of course the business kept going down, 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 down. Because if you don't adapt to circumstances that are changing around you, then you're not going to stay afloat. And we have to always be aware of circumstances changing around us, especially if we're dependent on a market or we're dependent on a situation that's beyond our, that's around us. We all are. We're all dependent on things around us, and we have to be aware of changes so that we can adapt to them. So when you look at Borders, the story of Borders, or the story of any of these businesses that waited too long to adapt or never adapted, whereas Barnes & Noble, they got into the, what's it called? What's that digital thing? The Nook, right? So they realized, so now their digital sales are very competitive. Because they realized early on, we'd better innovate and we'd better adapt. We'd better find a way to fit into the new market or we're going to lose our business. That was smart. And we can learn a principle for all of our lives, that if we see things changing around us. There's a great book written about this called Who Moved My Cheese? Has anybody ever read that book? It's a small, you read it? That's a great book. It's a little book. You can read it in like an hour. It's a small book. Very good book, Who Moved My Cheese? It talks about how life changes happen, and people who insist, no, I'm not going to change, I'm going to stay in the same place and everything is going to be fine, that eventually, they lose out. And that the changes happening around them, if they go with the flow and they seek new things and new opportunities, that they're going to succeed. So it's a great book, Who Moved My Cheese? It's a cute book. It's like about mice and everything, but it's written for grown-ups. It's written for grown-ups, I promise. But it's like a metaphor about mice. Okay. Now, let's go to the next. Say I give you book reviews, I give you business analysis, I give you relationship advice. It's everything. You have dinner. What more could you ask for? Okay. Now, the next one is about accumulating wealth. Let's try to understand. Now, Shlomo HaMelech was a wealthy guy, right? He knows how one goes about acquiring and keeping and growing his wealth. So let's see what he has to say about that. Very interesting things. Hon mehevel yim'at v'kovetz al yad yarveh. Says a person, literally what that means is, hon is a word for money. Okay? Mehevel, it comes from nothing. Like say a person wins the lottery. It's hon mehevel. He didn't have anything. Yesterday he was a truck driver and he made, $7 an hour or $7 a mile. I don't know how they. It can't be $7 a mile, then they'd be rich. Whatever he makes some minimum wage job, and he wins the lottery. It's always the people who are in sanitation work or whatever. All of a sudden, yesterday he was making $15,000 a year, and today he's a billionaire. He won the Powerball lottery, right? Hon mehevel yim'at. So Mishle says that's a bad thing. He's going to lose his money. The kovetz al yad yarbeh, but the person who builds up little by little is going to succeed. Okay? Now, why is it? So let's think for a second. It's not necessarily absolutely predetermined that the lottery winner is going to lose all of their money. Or whatever, the person who somehow has a windfall. Let's say it's not the lottery. They didn't have a lottery in the times of the Bible, but whatever it is. It's not predetermined that they're going to lose it, but it happens to be true. You know that, right? That most lottery winners who were not previously wealthy, not only do they often lose money, they often end up worse than they were before, getting into tons of debt and having all kinds of problems. They're terrible stories. Why is that?
They can't handle it.
Why can't they handle it?
It's too much.
I don't know.
They were never brought up with it.
Well, let's say a person who comes from rags to riches. They came from poor, but they build themselves up and they became rich. That happens all the time.
But that's not, it was gradually. It was not in one shot. And this is in one shot.
It's even deeper than that. It's not just that it was gradual. That is true.
They learned from it, and they learned the value of it because it didn't come that easily.
Okay, so that's definitely true, right? Something you work for, you appreciate it, right? Something that's just handed to you.
No, I was gonna say you get this example in a lot of scenarios, like relationships also. Like you don't value a friendship that you made right overnight, so you have to work on it.
Anything you get overnight.
Anything you get overnight has no value.
That's true. You don't value it the same. But there's something even more than that, which is what? He has to learn how to handle it is definitely true. If you made money by growing a business or whatever you did, okay? So you learned how to manage what you have. Okay? You have a skill or an ability to manage resources and grow them. But if you're just handed a whole bunch of money, so the same lack of skill that made you a $15,000 a year sanitation worker is the skill that you're going to bring to managing this, which is no skill. Okay? And so the person who doesn't have the ability is just going to end up spending the money or getting himself or herself into even more trouble than they were before. Because the point is that when you have a means of generating income or generating wealth, so that means that you've learned the ropes of something stable. Just handing somebody a gift of a large amount of money doesn't really, it's like the old saying, right? What's the old saying? Give a person a fish, right? Versus teach them how to fish. Right? Teach them how to fish and they'll be able to eat for a lifetime. If you only give them a fish, they'll only eat for one night, right? I forget the saying, exact wording, but it's the same concept, right? If you give them the skill, so they're going to be, then if they get a windfall, they know what to do with it. Yes?
Do you think that applies also to like following mitzvot and doing it little by little?
Yes. In fact, the Midrash says exactly that. It says that if a person learns or grows in their Torah little by little, it's going to be stronger. It's going to become a stronger acquisition than if they learn, even if they learn Torah. It says if the person learns 50 pages in one day, it's not going to be acquired as much as if they learn 1 page a day. 1 page a day, you absorb it, and then you build on the foundation. Whereas if you take in a ton of stuff at once, there's no foundation for it to rest on. So it's going to be lost. You're not going to be able to sustain it. And it's the same thing here. When it comes to the material world, if you don't have a framework to be able to manage what you get, then you're going to lose it. That's what Shlomo HaMelech is saying. It's better to build up to that. Because when you build up to it, it means that you have the wisdom and the understanding of how to generate income. And therefore, even if you have a windfall, you're going to know how to manage and generate more. Whereas if you don't know how to generate to begin with, then just giving a person a lot of money is asking for trouble. They're going to just go to Vegas with it. And they're going to fritter it away. They don't know what to do with that kind of money. Okay? Not just because they've never been wealthy before, but because they don't know how to manage resources in general. If they did, then they would have been in a different position. That's definitely true. Now, similarly, the next one, that the person who goes after unjust gain, okay, the person who steals, robs, is a pirate. That makes it a little more interesting, pirates. Anybody like that is going to ruin his house. Okay, ocher beto, he's going to bring problems. But sonem matanot yachye, if you hate gifts, you'll be able to live. So what does that mean? No more birthday parties. You have to hate gifts. Sonem matanot yachye. What does it mean, sonem matanot yachye? Why is it that if you gain things unjustly, you're going to bring problems, and you should hate gifts? So I think it's on the same theme as the first one, and it's the same idea that if you always are looking for an easy way out, exactly some kind of a scheme that you have going. Schemes have a limited shelf. There's only so many schemes that you can do. You can't scheme forever. Okay, you scheme and you made some money on the side. You're going to scheme again. You're going to scheme again. After a while, who are you going to scheme? Who are you going to scam? Your opportunities are going to run out. Unless you're one of those, those email scammers, that they from the Nigerian bank or whatever that they tell that they actually end up fooling a lot of older people that are not as savvy about internet and all that. But how many schemes and scams can a person do? Sonei matanot yechiyah. If you're always looking for a handout and a gift from people, and you're depending on that, so it's the same idea. You don't have the skill. You don't develop the skill. If you're too dependent on gifts, this was always the argument, again, not to get into politics, this is not a political question, but this was always one of the issues. I wouldn't say it's a decisive argument, but it's one of the issues that people have with welfare, let's say, in America. Because they say, well, when you hand people money, you're not telling them, learn the skill of how to make parnasa, how to make a living. Whereas really we need to tell people, learn the skills that you need to make a living. We can help them for a little while, but what ends up happening is that people then depend on that. They learn to depend on the gift. So they're waiting for, Barack Obama or whoever it is to send them a check every month so that they don't have to go and work. And in fact, sometimes it turns out for them that it ends up being a financial benefit not to work because of the way the system is set up. So sonei matanot yechiyah means that a person can't have their own life if they're depending on gifts or they're trying to work out scheming all the time. They have to find a way that's stable. Scheming is not stable. Right? Scheming means taking advantage of somebody here, once you take advantage of the guy one time, you can't do it again, so you have to find another victim, You're going to continuously be searching for new chance opportunities to take advantage, to rob somebody, pickpocket somebody, rob a bank. There's only so many times you can do that. And you're dependent upon random circumstances. Somebody left their wallet unattended and you went and grabbed it. Okay? Or somebody happens to hand you a large gift, or you win the lottery. So if you're depending on that, then you're not going to have a good parnasa, you're not going to have a good, stable life. And it breeds a dependency. It breeds a dependency on others. So what he's saying is, not that if somebody gives you a gift, you should return it and say, I'm sorry, sonei matanot yechiyah, I don't want to take this gift. I'm not saying that you should do that. The idea is the mentality of gift taking, right? The mentality of, like the people who are professional career tzedakah collectors. Right? I heard a story. This story is a true story. It's told to me by a rabbi. Has anybody heard of the seminary, Eshel Seminary?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, you heard of it? Okay. Okay. That's a fair. Did you go?
Yeah, I was 3.
When were you there?
I was there just and they were last.
Then how come I didn't see you? I was there. You didn't see me?
When did you come?
I was there to speak. I come and speak like once a year. I was there. Yeah.
Surprised.
No. I didn't expect such a warm response. That's wonderful. No, Rabbi Ben Harosh is my good friend. Rabbi Ben Harosh is my good friend. Yeah. He's amazing. He's great. Yeah, he's amazing. So anyway, he told me a story. So his daughter works in like social services in Israel, and so one of the things she has to do is help Haredi families, basically bilk the government. Basically find whatever assistance they can get for the government, because they live in, most of them live in a state of poverty, and they need to find, what can they get from the government in terms of assistance of various types to be able to live. That's her job. And so she was working with one family that was really suffering. The husband was in Kolel, and the wife was trying to make ends meet, and they had a lot of children, and they couldn't, they were really, really, really struggling. And no matter what, this husband would not consider the possibility of going to work, even though they were in dire circumstances. So one day, the wife came to see his daughter and said, I have good news. My husband finally got a job. And she was like, wow, that's great. Your husband got a job. That's wonderful. What's the job? Oh, he's going to go collect tzedakah from people in different synagogues, to be able to support us. So, the people who come around and they ask, that was, and Rabbi Ben Harosh said, that was the sad part, was that she considered that a job. The job was to go and beg for money from people instead of a normal job, like what we would think of, like a construction job. It's kind of sad. It's kind of sad. But the idea was that if you make matanot your life, that's what you're dependent on, so you don't develop the skill really to survive, because somebody that's their job, that they collect tzedakah to survive, is always going to be dependent on others, and is always going to be in a position of, waiting for opportunities to get gifts, but isn't going to be self-sufficient, and that's why we want to stay away from the mentality of gift giving. That happens to children too, that, they could be really spoiled by their parents. Their parents give them everything, and no matter what they do wrong, the parents just give them more, and when they ruin it, their parents give them more, so then they end up never developing the responsibility for what they have. Okay, they become irresponsible. They just think that, anything that goes wrong, mommy and daddy are gonna fix it. I won't have to become self-sufficient. Yes?
Does he comment on his opinion on whether it's good to have a lot of money or not good to have a lot of money?
I don't think there's anybody who thinks it's not good.
No.
It just depends what you do with it.
No, there's opinion.
Yeah.
I've heard opinions that.
Yes, there is.
You know what I mean? Does he? Because he does have a lot of money.
He does, yeah.
So.
He does, and it causes, yeah.
An idea
So
on
he
whether
generally,
it's
I would say that the usual tone of Mishle is the assumption, because he's always telling you, you don't want to waste your money, you want to be able to grow it, so his general attitude towards having money is positive, for sure, because he's telling you wisdom, is associated, it says, wisdom is associated with also succeeding and other things. But there is a part at the end of Mishle. There are some parts at the end of Mishle that aren't written by Shlomo HaMelech. They're written by other people. And there's a very famous verse that says, Hashem, I ask you for two things. Don't make me too wealthy, because then I might forget about Hashem. Meaning, if I'll become arrogant, I'll forget Hashem. And don't make me too poor, because then I might steal. I might be so debased that I have to steal to survive. He says, give me lechem chuki. Give me my daily bread. That's where that term comes from. It's from Mishle. Give me my daily bread. Meaning, give me what I need to survive. So that's a different level, because basically that's saying, don't make me, that wealth can have a corrupting influence on people. But that's up to you. It doesn't have to. If you look at it with the right perspective, it doesn't have to corrupt you. So I don't think in Judaism we think having anything is intrinsically good or bad. It's always about your attitude towards it, right? It's always about your attitude towards it. So saying good or bad is too general. It's too general.
Our rabbi said that when you have a lot of something, it's always a test.
Sure, everything. I mean, everything you have is how you're going to relate to it and what you're going to do with it. Everything. I'd say, is being beautiful good? Well, it says that Sarah Imenu is beautiful, Rivka Imenu is beautiful, Rachel, Leah, they're beautiful. So it must be something good, right? Well, it could also be bad, because, the woman could become vain, or man. Also, Yosef was very good looking. It says he was doing his hair in the mirror too much or whatever. So beauty could be a wonderful thing. It could be a great thing, or it could be a negative thing. If the person becomes self-absorbed and vain, and they're only focusing on their appearance, and they don't care about other people, and they don't care about things that really matter, because they become superficial and all that. So it certainly could be negative. Does that mean it's always negative? No. In and of itself, it could be perfectly good. Just depends what you do with it. It could be a blessing. So it says that having a beautiful home, having a beautiful or handsome spouse, is a good thing if you're a tzaddik. So it says in the Mishnah. Because why? Because that means that you have the right perspective. You're not going to think that's all there is to it. Since my husband looks like George Clooney or whatever. I don't know. Is George Clooney's too old, right? For you guys? Okay. I don't know who's it now. Who is it now? Who's the guy now? I don't know. I don't even know who that is. Oh, that guy. Yeah, right. Yeah, I don't think so. Okay. He's gonna be unavailable for a long time. But did you see the news today? He got signed as modeling. Yeah. So that guy, the mugshot, the good-looking mugshot guy, but he's got those tattoos and the whole thing. It's not my type. Okay. Anyway. Okay, the other ones here we can all figure out and think about them, but I wanted to get to the last theme before our time runs out. There is one other one here where it talks about, but these are somewhat, extensions of the above. one of the proverbs says, one who loves celebration will be poor. One who loves wine and oil will not become rich. So it's a similar idea. In other words, but it's talking about a different angle, which is if you like partying a lot, you're going to become poor for the very simple reason that you're going to waste all your money in partying. And if you like wine and oil, you're not going to become rich because you're not going to save money and invest it. You're going to wine and oil. In those days, oil. Today we go to the supermarket and you buy oil. It's not that expensive, but in those days, wine was cheap. Oil was very expensive. Oil was much more expensive. So oil was considered like a luxury. If you had olive oil, they would put on bread as like the way we use butter, or margarine or whatever. So they would. It was considered a delicacy or a very fine like I guess what is it? The fish eggs that they eat, caviar, right? It was like a fine delicacy that the people would eat. So if you like, it's saying if you love yain v'shemen, you like wine and oil, you're not going to become rich. Why? Because you're going to see every opportunity. Oh, let's go out to eat again. Let's go out and to another fancy restaurant. Let's go out again. So you're never going to take what you do have and invest it wisely in your future and building something, because you're going to go moment by moment. Same thing with a party. That's when people have big parties, I always said, and especially, in New York, because this is where I'm from, so I'm very familiar with the drill. The amount of money that's spent on parties, no matter how much you spend on a wedding, you're still hungry the next day. The next morning you have to have breakfast. No matter how good the dinner was, it's only one night, only a few hours, right? You spend $1 million on dinner, and the next morning you wake up and got to start all over again. Yeah. So I never. So keeping things in perspective. Keeping things in perspective. So just our last topic. Yes.
Is there a difference between poor and not rich, or is that just like flooding?
I think it's there's a difference that one is saying you're going to become poor if you like partying too much, meaning you might have started out wealthy. You'll impoverish yourself. Whereas the person who every time they have money burns a hole in their pocket, we say, right? In other words, every time they have any money, they immediately say, "Oh, let's spend it on a fancy dinner. Let's go on vacation. Let's do this." Lo ya'ashir, they won't become wealthy because they'll never invest the money in anything bigger than the momentary enjoyment. So a person has to keep a long-term perspective. I think that's the idea of that proverb, is that both whether you have it already or you want to have it, you have to have perspective on the big picture of your spending, whether what you're spending things on is really what's of lasting worth or not. You want to always invest in something more stable, not something more fleeting. Like a Rambam actually says that as an example. He says a person should always try to move his investments to something more stable, not something more fleeting. And that's, because the more stable it is, the more long-lasting it is. Obviously, everything that we have is only temporary. But, even in our short lives, things that are more stable are more worthwhile investing in. And things that are momentary, like a great fancy dinner that cost you $5,000, and then, especially if it's Chinese food, 2 hours later, you need to eat again. So what did you gain? So that's the way to think about it. Now, concern for ourselves and others. This is the last theme. So the first one is a very famous saying. In fact, it's so famous that they made an English version of it, which doesn't exactly capture the Hebrew. The English version is "Spare the rod, spoil the child." Okay, that's the saying in English. But it came from this pasuk: "Chosech shivto soneh beno." Somebody who spares the rod hates the son. That's very strong language. Ve'oavo, if you love the son, shicharo musar, you're going to quickly, shicharo comes from the word shachar, morning. I mean, first thing in the morning, you're going to correct them. So, what is this talking about? Today, right? Parents, they want to show how cool they are. Right? Parents want to be cool. They don't want to tell their kids what to do. Right? You heard about this 12-year-old kid, he went on America's Got Talent, starts telling dirty jokes. He's a supposedly Jewish kid with a kippah on. I didn't see it, but I heard about it, right? So, and the parents are all there with a kippah on. Also the father, we're so proud of our son, saying totally inappropriate jokes, even for a grown adult, and it's like 12 years old. So, it was in the news. But anyway, the parents want to show how cool they are. Oh yeah, we think it's great that our son is saying that kind of stuff, or we're not gonna try to. We don't want to alienate our son. We want to be totally cool with him, and so that he'll think that we're really with it parents. We're gonna dress like ghetto guys also, and hang out and go out drinking with him. Whatever. They think that the way to win. So wait, I'll put it out to you. So why do you think? Okay. What is it that really? It's amazing that parenting hasn't changed much in thousands of years, right? So, what is the parent sparing the rod here is obviously a metaphor. It doesn't mean you should be beating your kids all the time. That's just a metaphor for correcting them. Okay, so when the pasuk is talking about restraining yourself, you hate the child. What do you think it's trying to get at? And if you really love them, you're going to correct them. Why do you restrain the rod? What's the reason? Either you don't care, or you want them to like you, or but it's just easier not to bother, right? I'd say probably for most parents, it's probably something around I want my kid to love me. I want them to love me, and if I start correcting them and everything, they're going to think I'm out of touch, and I'm annoying, and I'm a nudge, and I'm this. So you know what? I'm just going to let them do whatever they want. Okay? And the question is that really caring about the child? That's what Shlomo Melech is saying so powerfully. If you hold back the rod, you hate the child. Because who do you really care about? You're really saying, me, because I want the child to love me, right? And if I'm uncool and I start telling him not to do certain things, he's not going to like me anymore. So when you refrain from, you're really not helping your child if you don't correct them. Or whoever, it doesn't have to be a child, by the way. The point is anybody for whom you are responsible. If you don't help them, if you don't correct them when they need correction, you're not really caring about them. You think, I'm being so tolerant and so open-minded and so caring, and of course they're going to love me because I'm not saying anything about the things that they do wrong. Like you might have friends like that too. Right? That, they're doing all kinds of stuff that is not good for them, but you don't want to be uncool by saying something about it. Now, there's not always an opportunity to say something about it when it comes to friends. Sometimes it's very complicated, but with children, certainly where the parent has the ability to lay down the law, so to speak, at least up to a certain age. So if they refrain from doing that, they're not really caring about the child. They're caring more about their being loved by the child. Okay? It's similar to the third one here. Porea musar mo'es nafsho, v'shomea tochachat kon elev. A person who rejects criticism hates his soul. But the person who listens to criticism acquires a heart. Why do you hate your soul if you don't listen to criticism? You don't want to grow. You don't want to improve yourself, right? What do you care about then? What's your priority? If you don't want to hear criticism, what's important to you?
Criticize others.
What do you say? Feeling good about yourself, or seeing the negative in others, for sure. We all do that very well. We're extremely good at seeing the negative in others. It's harder to see it in yourself, right? We want to feel good about ourselves. So just like you want your child to feel good about you and not negatively, so you don't criticize them, even though you're not really helping them. When you don't take criticism yourself, you're hating yourself, because you're saying, it's more important to me to feel good about who I am and think that I'm perfect than to really actually become better. That's why it says, kon elev, you will get a heart. You will get a heart of wisdom. That's what it means. You'll become wise. You'll acquire the skills for living better and for being better if you listen. But if you don't listen, just because you want to keep your feeling, it hurts to hear criticism that's true, right? To realize that you did something wrong, or to hear criticism that's accurate about yourself, it stings, it doesn't feel good. And even, weeks, months, years later, if you go back to a situation where you felt humiliated, or you felt really ashamed of something that you did wrong, it still hurts, right? It still hurts. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that, So it's not something that goes away. And yet, if you grew from it, it was certainly worth it. In other words, if you had gone along in life thinking, what I did was perfectly fine, and you didn't have that experience, you wouldn't have become the person that you are now. That we've all had experiences like that, where something happened that we realized we messed up big time, and we improved as a result of that. And so if we're not willing to do that, we're not really caring even about ourselves. Like a person, to use the analogy again, who goes to the doctor, and the doctor gives them all kinds of, issues that they have, all kinds of medical problems, and they don't care. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear it. They're not going to change their lifestyle. They're not going to change what they eat. They're not going to change anything about their life because they don't want to hear it. They're fine. I'm fine. I'm going to be fine. So that's not really caring about yourself even. Just like not caring about your child by not intervening. The last one I just want to look at, and then I already kept you too late, so don't be upset. Yodea tzaddik nefesh behemto. I hope you'll forgive me. But the tzaddik knows the soul of his animal. That's deep. What does that mean? Okay? But the compassion of the bad person is actually cruelty. Yeah, the compassion of the wicked person is cruel. What does it mean knowing your animal? He's like Dr. Doolittle. Remember Dr. Doolittle? Talk to the animal. Huh? Well, he's saying he knows the nature of his animal, right? In the case of the tzaddik. It could be a metaphor for like something within yourself, right? Like your own animal means like the animal within. Yeah. Right? It could be. But even in the simplest reading, it means that that you're taking care of someone, of even the animal. In other words, even an animal, like a good zookeeper, for example. I can't be a zookeeper. I don't know what the lion needs, what the panda needs, what the giraffe needs. We just come and look at them, right? But if a real zookeeper has to know what each one of those animals needs. And if you decide, well, I really like Klondike bars, so I'm going to give Klondike bar to the giraffe, you're going to kill the giraffe because you're not really giving the giraffe what it needs. So the contrast here is that the wicked person could do something very nice for you, but he's not really thinking, or she's not really thinking about you. That's why it says v'rachamei rachamei r'shayim achzari, that the wicked person's kindness is actually cruelty, because they're really thinking about themselves. Okay, they're really thinking about themselves. Whereas the tzaddik, even when he relates to an animal, tries to understand what does the animal need. What does the animal need? Meaning, even not just a person, but his kindness or her kindness is that he or she recognizes the needs of others and actually addresses those needs, not what they want it to be. Okay, so an example of the wrong way that the Talmud gives is, let's say your friend's mother, father, relative passed away. Okay? And you haven't seen them, you haven't spoken to them in 2 years. And you see them after 2 years, their parent passed away 2 years ago. You say, oh, I'm so sorry about your mom, dad, brother, sister. They've already gotten over that, right? They're not thinking about that right now. They don't want to think about that right now. And you just brought it into their mind. There's actually a halakha that after 12 months, you're not supposed to bring that up. If the person brings it up and says, I keep thinking about my relative that they passed away, I'm so sad, of course you should help them. But if they don't bring it up, after 12 months, you're not supposed to bring it up. And the Midrash gives a sort of a mashal, also an example to illustrate this, and says, it's like a doctor who breaks your leg so that they can fix it. In other words, this person wasn't feeling the pain of that loss. They're trying to grow past it. And you just put it in their face. Why? So you could show what a nice friend you are. Just like the doctor who breaks the leg so that they could then show what a good doctor they are by fixing it. Or like those dentists that you hear about in the news sometimes, right? That they're doing the teeth and they leave just a little bit of cavity, a little bit, so that it will come back. So, you need another thing. Now you need a root canal. Why? Because they didn't do a good job the first time. But why did they do that? So that you'd have to come back. There were a couple of dentists that got in trouble for doing that years ago. That's what the Gemara gives, or the Talmud gives an example of this type of kindness is not really kindness, because this type of kindness is a kindness to show what a good friend you are, but you're not really caring about your friend, because that wasn't really what they needed at that time. They didn't want to hear about that. You were just doing what you needed to feel like a good friend. So what's the common theme here? The common theme here is when you're caring about another person, you should be caring about what they need, not what you need. Okay? That's really caring. Really caring about another person is caring about what they need. Not focusing on, wow, they're going to see what a good friend I am because I brought up this painful thing and then I fixed it by being really nice about it. We don't want to be in that situation. We want to be like the tzaddik who understands even an animal what it needs in order to address its needs, as best as possible. And that's the way that we should think when we're helping others. And ourselves too. When we think about what's good for ourselves, we should say, what do I really need? Not what do I want to imagine that I need, but what do I really need? Sometimes the two things are different. Yes?
I like the examples that you gave on that, but something doesn't click for me.
Okay.
Because you gave like a very harsh example. Let's say it's amongst friends, for example, and it could be in the person's characteristic that they're just not as caring as you are,
right?
Or the person is just extra sensitive. So how do you know?
Well, in any situation, I'll tell you what I'll do.
A little clearer.
When I've been like a rabbi counseling people a lot of times, and people will come to me with a problem. Here's my problem, blah 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 blah, whatever it is. And my answer to them, after I listen to them and hear it out, I always say to them, okay, how can I help you? How would you like me to help you? How can I be helpful to you? Because we sometimes assume what the other person wants from us, or what we would want if we were in their situation, or what we think we would need, or what we think they should want, but it might not be what they really need or want. Does that make sense? So it's really important to ask. And I even have sometimes relatives that will come and they'll come with all kinds, or my kids will come with my children a lot of times will come with problems, and I'll hear them, and then at the end I say, okay, well, how can I be helpful to you? What can I do to be helpful to you? Because we're very prone to thinking that what we would want or what we would need is exactly what they must need. And that's not the best thing to assume. Does that make sense? It's a less harsh way of putting it, less extreme.
Yeah. Yes.
We're getting called out. Yeah.
It's okay.
So we wanted to conclude by asking people about topics, right?
Yes.
Okay.